I know you both have a Game of the Week recommendation for us. We'll get to that very shortly. I must say last week's recommendations were on point. Andy, well, they were actually. I don't think we've had a better, more compulsive or compelling Game of the Week suggestions from both of our experts. Last week, Andy went for El Clasico. Turned out to be a goal fest, a one-way goal fest, but yours, Nicky, you went for the Derby d'Italia, which turned out to be a two-sided goal fest, as it were. A cracker of a match, but does it ask questions of Inter rather than pose questions to Juventus, the result?
Yeah, it was an absolutely balmy game of football. I think, as Simone Inzaghi put it afterwards, good fun for you neutral spectators watching, a bit less fun for me and us lot in the dugout. It was a really interesting night. I think that of all the outcomes I would have guessed at beforehand, 4-4 would have been pretty far down the list. 3-2 at halftime was already the highest scoring first half in a Derby d'Italia, so it was extraordinary stuff. It's a really odd point to be talking about Inter, because they followed this up by beating Empoli 3-0 in midweek. Empoli did have a player sent off very early on, but a pretty confident response. They are second in the table. They are hardly out of any sort of running. That their overall trajectory of the season, there's quite a lot to be said about it that's very positive. They played very well against Manchester City in the Champions League. They had a thumping 4-0 win over Atalanta. There's been a lot of positive, but I think it speaks to the moment that you have a Napoli team who have shown up under Antonio Conte and proven very competitive. And at the same time, Simone Inzaghi, by his success over the last 2 seasons, has raised expectations for Inter so much higher that there was just a little bit, not a lot. No one's talking any sort of serious trouble in paradise, but there was a little bit of tension after this draw with Juventus. And part of that is because you throw away a winning position because you're 4-2 up, and you shouldn't do that. You should be able to close out 4-2 in the second half at home. Certainly as a team that's built part of its reputation on being very tight at the back. But there is this feeling, I think, perhaps for the first time, that Simone Inzaghi, who showed up there as a promising manager who'd done well at Lazio, but perhaps didn't have total expectation upon him because he was following Antonio Conte and Inter was selling players every summer, and it was a kind of see what you can do situation, and who then last season just smashed any expectation anyone could have set because they won the league by miles. For the first time, there is a target on Inter's back, and that changes the dynamic with everything. It changes the dynamic with the way your supporters, what they expect and want. It changes what your press response is going to be. And there was just this little moment in the Inzaghi presser afterwards where he just looked at the reporter, asked him a question and said, well, the first 2 questions in here have not been in good faith. And I just thought there's a little bit of tension here that wasn't there before. And I think it could be massively overstated, especially given how they responded. Remind everyone that at the end of January this year, Inter were not top of the table, and they wound up winning the league by, I can't remember how many points, nearly 20. And so we shouldn't make this overly dramatic, but I do think there's a little bit of, okay, this is what it feels like to be the front runner and the one who's expected to win, rather than being the team that's still impressing everybody.
Yeah, of course, we should never write Inter off. That would be madness, David, wouldn't it? You can't write them off. They are still Inter. You expect a certain level of success from them one way or another. Having said that, I do wonder whether, when in the description of Inter that Nicky gives with a target on their back now, having had success in both Europe and domestically last season, that should be something that they're used to, shouldn't it? They should be always seen as the ones to beat over a team like Napoli, for example, even though Napoli have done really well, I'm not taking anything away from that, but they're the ones that are leading the pack at the moment, rather than Inter being the ones with the target on their back. I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and I just think Napoli's in an incredible moment. A lot of energy still around them, as you'd expect with Conte, of course. But for Inter, it's just a case of not just having some people chasing you and some people putting a target on your back. It's the fact that the two clubs who are there, Napoli and Juve, just seem to have improved so considerably, and I think that's a bit of a shock to the system in a way. So and I'm not saying Inter have gone backwards. I think if we look at Inter's business since Inzaghi came in, even just before, very astute, very smart in everything they've done. I think they had another summer of exactly that. So I don't think they've done anything wrong in terms of their business. I just think it's the two teams around them have improved so considerably. On the bench, two new coaches there as well. In Juve's case, a lot of new players. So it's interesting to see that and how Inter, do deal with it. And they always say it's harder to remain at the top than actually get there.
Yeah, there's another sort of sub-element of it, I think, which we think about how Inter have dominated Italian football in the last few years, and there's been a lot of it that's Inzaghi's tactical fluidity, the way he's got the team moving, which I think is so fun and enjoyable to watch. But there is also the classic part of it, which is they've been very, very tight at the back. I think last season they conceded 22 goals in Serie A. They've already conceded 13 this season. We're only 10 games in, and I think it's again, to keep stressing, we're talking about small details, but small details are what matter when you're trying to be the best. And I think there's the way that Jan Sommer let in a couple of those goals at the weekend for the first time, people looking going, hang on, this guy came in and it was kind of okay when he replaced Onana and he did well. But maybe this isn't the level of goalkeeping we need to have to be one of the top teams in Europe, which is what they're aspiring to be. Questions about the rest of the defence and why suddenly it's looking so not together, because they really didn't make it difficult. It was a real odd story because Kenan Yildiz was this exciting teenager scoring twice in Derby d'Italia, but both of his goals, the defending was poor, and it's just that feeling of, is there something that's been lost around the edges and how easy is it to go back? And again, they then went to beat Empoli 3-0. Empoli, who'd conceded one goal at home all season. And to make the opposite point in even the Derby d'Italia, as Inzaghi did, Juventus had conceded one goal all season and we put 4 past them. We should be celebrated for this, was Inzaghi's argument. So it's not that we're talking in absolute negatives at all, but there's just a sense of a lack of the swagger that was there last season, and as David just said, that feels different because Napoli suddenly have got this swagger, not even swagger back like they had when they won the league, but a whole new Antonio Conte swagger, it feels like.
Yeah, it does feel exciting from Napoli's perspective. But I wonder, Nicky, if when you said that they aim to be one of the best teams in Europe, whether that's more of an imperative than they aim to be the best team in Italy.
I think there's no question that for Inzaghi and for the players, winning in Europe after getting so close a couple of years ago would be the pinnacle. It's the thing that I think would drive them the most. But at the same time, when you've just climbed back on top of the domestic pile, you don't want to give that up. You don't want to let that go straight away. So yes, I do think that at the start of this season, there probably has been a bit more of a focus on Europe. And I think that Manchester City game again was a real focus point early in the season, and getting through that with a draw and playing well enough they could even have won that game was a real positive feeling moment. But perhaps again, this result of letting slip a 4-2 lead against Juventus has just reminded everyone that you aren't going to have it all your way at home.
Yeah, it's a distraction at the very least, isn't it, David? European competition when you've got that target on your back, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Inter have made incredible gains in Europe over the past few years. The way that they've improved, not just domestically, but also on a European level. They're a real threat. They're a real danger. I think they actually made themselves the new Atleti in a way. In the case of, they're just outside of that elite group that everyone always talks about, but nobody wants to play them. Nobody wants to go across two legs against an Inzaghi in the side. That is grueling. And look, Juventus, the way that they approached the game was really, really interesting and refreshing, I'd say. From what we've seen of Juventus over the past few years, I think this was kind of the moment, the time for Juve fans to say, right, okay, this is where we see where our team is at. When we're going to go up against a team who have established themselves not only in Italy, in Europe. This is how far we are potentially off that level, and they showed that they can. Not only live with them, but really compete to a high level with them. And I do just want to as well just touch on Yildiz as well again. I don't think there's many more exciting youngsters in Europe right now. He's in the top 3 to watch at the moment. I think he's absolute box office.
I think there's another subtext, all that subtext today. There's another subtext this which I think is really relevant to what David just said, which is Inter are the oldest team in Serie A, and it's not close. Average age squad, I think, is 29.1 years old. The next team is 27 point something. So it's a big difference from Inter to everyone else. Juventus have the second youngest. So part of the subtext of this, having a target on your back, being the one that's expected to win, is Inter are not looking at the future here. This is a team that's supposed to win now. Juventus are a coming force. Juventus, they showed some of the frailty of that in their very next game. They didn't win in midweek. They drew 2-2 with Parma and very nearly lost. But the upside is all Juventus is in that rivalry. Inter are playing with a hand that has I'm really mixing my metaphors here, but it has a limited expiry on it.
It's not a bad one. That's not a bad mixed metaphor. But where does Napoli sit between the youngest team and the team of geriatrics that are Inter?
I think they're actually second oldest. But it's with, again, a good almost 2 years younger than Inter on average. So a significant drop, but I think they are the second oldest in the division. Their sense of upward mobility is less to do with having a young squad, although there are some young players in that team that are pretty interesting. It's more to do with having Antonio Conte showing up and doing what he always does, which is win.
Yeah, but hang on a second. Just on that note, just on that Antonio Conte swagger note, David, we know, don't we, that Antonio Conte has a certain reputation. Can he keep up the swagger for the entire season? Surely it's got to be a question.
Well, we've touched on this before, and I'm honestly not buying into the fact that he can keep it up all season. I'm just expecting that drop off at some point. I'm expecting this energy to drop. They have started fantastically, don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying watching them. It's great to see. But I just still feel it's going to be between Inter and Juve come last 8 to 10 games of the season, if I'm honest with you.
Nicky?
Yeah, we're coming to the interesting part, and their game against Milan on Tuesday night was the beginning of the interesting part, because arguably up to now they've had a pretty gentle start to the season with the fixture list. They actually lost their first game to Verona 3-0, and everyone was going, hang on, this is a pretty awful start. But since then they've now got 8 wins in the 9 games since. The only one that wasn't a win was a draw away to Juventus, so pretty good stuff. Then we get to this point where you're looking at suddenly in a 6-week run, their schedule, including the Milan game they played on Tuesday night, went Milan away, Atalanta at home, Inter away, Roma at home, Torino away, and then Lazio twice because they're playing them in the Cup and the League. So that's a pretty chunky 6-week schedule to get into. And everyone's been looking at it and going, well, this is the point where we really find out what they're made of. Well, game 1 went well. They beat Milan. But Milan, one of the, I wouldn't necessarily say one of the weaker names on that list because Roma are also having trouble, but definitely one of the teams on that list who aren't actually at their strongest right now either. And in fact, for this game, even were had to start without probably the best player this season, Christian Pulisic, which was another blow. So that was not the toughest of these tough tests. And I think the next one against Atalanta will be a lot tougher. And then after that, again, it's Inter. So we're going to learn some things about this Napoli side very, very soon. But I'm a bit more convinced than David is about this Napoli team. I think there's a real feeling about it, of just that feeling of an Antonio Conte team coming together. They're playing his football. There are pieces there that look totally familiar. Romelu Lukaku obviously is as soon as he gets on a team that Conte manages, he's a different animal, and he looks like it again. He's playing so well. Took his goal just brilliantly at the start of this game against Milan. It was a proper Lukaku goal where Strahina Pavlovic, who is 6'4" Serbia international and he's a big man, tries to climb over Lukaku, getting at the ball, and just bounces off him and ends up on the floor. And those are the goals that make you go, "Wow, Lukaku is just so good when he's in that bullish, can't be stopped kind of form." But it wasn't just that. When you look at the goal back and you see that Politano makes this run off to the right that just creates a bit of extra space for the first ball in that goes to Anguissa in the middle of the pitch, gives Anguissa the space to turn and put that ball into Lukaku. The pieces are all working, and McTominay has hit the ground running brilliantly since he got there, and Billy Gilmore looked really good in this game, and you saw Conte give him a massive bear hug at the end, and some of the other players like Oliveira have really shown fantastic form at left back this season. Pieces are just coming together at the moment, and yes, it is going to look different once they've come through these tough games. I don't think they're going to win all these games, and I don't think that a 4-point lead in October, even though it's surprising, is something to take too seriously. But I think they're going to come through this 6-game run. I won't even say top. I think they're going to come through it, this 6-week run, in better shape than I might have thought a couple of weeks ago. And I think that once they do that, the confidence is going to really be high for a team that, let's remind ourselves, does not have European football to deal with, which is going to be a big advantage the longer the season goes.